Hello, ELIC 30. This is Michael, and we are in How to Be Human, an Autistic Man's Guide to Life by Jory Fleming. And we are beginning Chapter 3, which starts on page 57. Energy and Memory. Talking about the energy consumed by autism. A central topic of Jory's and my conversations was energy, specifically mental energy. This is not the proverbial and perhaps all too familiar "I'm feeling tired and sluggish" type of energy drain. Instead, Jory is acutely aware of his brain's energy reserves, the way a long-haul trucker must pay close attention to the gas gauge. What he said sent me to research basic facts about the human brain's energy consumption. Our brains use more energy than any other organ, roughly 20% of the body's total expenditure. About 3/4 of that energy is used to help neurons send signals, but neuroscientists believe the balance is most likely used for cell maintenance, performing basic tasks to keep the cells healthy and functioning. It is the mental equivalent of doing laundry, washing the dishes, and tidying up. Most of us probably do not think about how much energy our minds require to operate, but Jory does every day. This energy use is also directly related to Jory's external environment. Jory: I'm always conscious of having to keep autism in a corner, and I have to divert mental energy to do that. I imagine a big switch located at the entrance to my mind labeled important, and immediately via that switch, a set amount of energy is shunted off inside my brain from the moment I wake up. That energy demands changes with the environment. If I'm at home, I just need to meet the minimum threshold. But if I'm out and about, the amount of energy I need to maintain that inner mental balance changes, and I need more. I'm always aware that I have a limited supply, so I have to be careful how I spend it. What's left over is all that I have to do tasks such as form sentences, come up with things to say in a conversation, think during class, walk down a street, or whatever. I love thinking about hard problems, but I always know that no matter what the hard problem is, while I can do a lot, I won't be able to do as much as possible. I feel as if most people don't have that issue. They can use 100% of their mental faculties, and it's not a problem. I also know that the energy I have available can fluctuate significantly depending on the environment I'm in. 3 people in a room probably won't change it a tremendous amount. But the more people you add and the more complex of an environment, the more energy I have to expend, and the quicker my reserve depletes. You're not going to hear me talking philosophy in a cafe. I'm not going to have the mental energy available. Some situations are so overwhelming that I have to make choices, such as leaving. I'll know that I only have enough energy to tolerate an environment for 30 minutes, and then I will have to leave or I will just shut down. After spending time in an extremely crowded, noisy environment, I might also be a little bit grumpy the next day because I haven't been able to recharge and refill my energy reserves. I don't think that's true in the same way for most people. They don't have to think about what it takes to be themselves or whether they will have the mental energy. But for me, it changes all the time. I've never been in a truly isolated environment like solitary confinement in prison or a place where there was a lot of sensory deprivation, but I have a feeling that it wouldn't work on me. Its intended effect would not happen. Instead, I'd have more mental energy to do more things. LW. What is silence to you? Jory. I conceptualize silence in terms of things going on, not just sounds. To me, silence means something like meditation or going to a morning prayer service in the chapel, where it's really still and you're not thinking about stuff. That's what I would consider silence, even if it's not quiet. During those times, there are certainly no noises going on in my head, though. That would be terrible. Most of us who are neurotypical might have what we consider internal monologues with ourselves. We organize our thoughts using words, and we express our internal thoughts with words. But that is not the process that occurs inside Jory's brain. Jory. There's no language whatsoever connected to my thoughts inside my brain, unless for some reason I have to tell someone else about it. I don't have a me voice that says, on Thursday you're signed up to help with the chapel and there's dinner afterwards. Make sure you don't show up late. I work with data points. They contain information and look like little beads. I put things in those beads. It could be anything from something I've read in a book to something a professor or friend has said. Or it could be an observation that I've made, something that was never based in words in the first place. But even if there was language in there at some point, I've removed the language by placing it inside the bead. All the beads are the same, and I treat them all the same. I take whatever knowledge is being processed and put it into Jory format. That's the first part. The next is when I want to retrieve something, I get a truckload of beads out of storage. Their position and location in my mind space are very easily altered. I may make connections. I may not. Sometimes the connections are very arbitrary. Mostly, I just shift the beads around and make a mess of the beads and see what happens. Because while the beads are very tangible to me, the interconnections among them are not. It's all very much done on the fly, and there are no words in there. There's no need for words. Words would just complicate things. The information I have occupies space. It has some kind of dimensional property, but words aren't like that. To me, the letter A has no dimensions. I think of words as being like arbitrary streams of light or sets of arbitrary shapes that people have come up with. Whereas with my beads, I've removed all the differentiation among the symbols. There's no A, B, C, D. There's none of that confusing extra stuff that language has. Nothing to slow you down or shackle you. None of that ambiguity. Maybe other people's brains operate like a typewriter, and it's like a stream of words coming in. Bing, bing. That's how the machine is set up. It's fine. It's not a problem for them. But for me, a stream of words can't exist in bead space or Jory space or whatever you want to call it. It just doesn't work. LW. How do you organize Jory beads? Jory. I don't think there's much organization. I think they're easy to fly through really, really quickly when you're searching. I almost feel as if, in my laziness, after I've chucked them all over the place, I can search through them really fast. But now that I'm in grad school, I've learned a lot of stuff in the past 5 years in particular, as anybody who uses their mind actively and enjoys pulling in new information does. Now it seems that because of the amount of information that I have to scan through, it takes a little bit longer. The thing is, I have to scan the whole thing. It's not even organized by areas. Rather, when I start thinking about something, my brain does a complete scan. A very tiny fraction of my brain is actively looking at each bead and deciding yes, no, yes, no. Directly related to energy is the environment. For Jory, some environments are extremely draining and quickly deplete his limited energy resources. We frequently talked about how Jory perceives the world as we experience it, and how that world is not set up to be hospitable to autism. At the same time, being able to navigate the external environment is crucial to Jory's ability to function. Jory. If there's anything that autism has taught me about the environment, it is that you can't escape your environment. You're not a bird. You can't fly away. I suppose on some level you can fly away, but it's a lot more difficult for people to fly away from an individual environment. Here in England, when it's a dark stretch and the sun hasn't poked out for a good many days, people are cranky. The environment has a very pervasive effect. Although geographers know the dangers of going too far with that environmental determinism. That was how colonial explorers justified things like slavery and colonialism, by saying that the environment, actually the heat of the sun, was sapping worker productivity and was why Europe was more industrialized. It was basically an intellectual cover for colonialism. For me, at least, the environment is more deterministic than it is for other people. I think my ideal environment is me, but the internal bits. Anywhere there are people, it's going to be hard to find a hospitable environment for autism. That sounds very accusatory, but really, It's nothing against other people. It has nothing to do with anything that other people are doing. It's very rare when I can reduce my mental expenditure, so it's always invaluable when I can. I mostly do that at home and with people I know really well. When I was going to college, I lived at home, and there was no mental energy expenditure there. At Oxford, especially when we first got here, it took a lot more mental energy, and I was pretty worn out from that process. A concrete example of how Jory's brain attempts to manage the sensory overload of new or complex environments is illustrated by one by one anecdote, Jory and the Invisible Window. Jory. For example, in the house we rented in Oxford, in my room there was a window on the same wall as my bed. And about 9 months after we had moved in, Mom and I were talking, and I said, "There are only skylights in my room, no windows." And she replied, "What are you talking about? There's a window by your bed." And I said, "No, there's not." "Well, there is a window at the foot of my bed, and I just had not known it was there. All my mind saw was a wall. I think it's because I have a lower environmental brain level. I'm paying less attention to my environment because I feel like our rental house is my home base. Even though I like to think I have a good amount of mental energy at this point, I still overestimate the amount of mental energy I do have because I miss something as obvious as a window." And we'll stop there for this video.